Chapter 26. Dark Highways. The sensation of successfully evading capture energized Katie's mind as she saw the trailing lights of Sierra's pursuers diminish into the far reaches of the tunnel. Slipping out from the ventilation shaft, the inky darkness enveloped her. But Katie was relentless. Every touch and texture was amplified in the stifling dark, guiding her hands to the familiar contours of her motorcycle. With seamless fluidity, she mounted and sped off, aiming for Jefferson City, the weight of the situation propelling her forward. Fuel dwindling, she took a calculated risk to halt her momentum, refueling from a jerry can secured at the back. The seconds felt like minutes, but soon enough she was back on her way, the tunnel consuming her once more. The eerie stillness of the tunnel played tricks on her perception, making 80 miles per hour feel like a crawl, a surreal experience of speed yet stasis. A distant glow began to pierce the eternal night of the tunnel. Relief and caution warred in Katie's mind. The entrance from Jefferson City was in sight, but she knew what awaited. She began blaring the motorcycle's horn, desperate to signal her approach to the undoubtedly armed guards. Her attempts at caution were futile. The sharp retort of a gunshot pierced the silence. Chaos ensued. The impact sent Katie and her beloved motorcycle skidding across the cold floor of the tunnel. A jarring crash followed by the aggressive roar of flames consuming the bike, casting wild shadows across the walls. The once dark tunnel was now painted with an angry orange light. Guards, drawn by the spectacle, approached cautiously, weapons trained. They found what appeared to be a lifeless form, contorted in pain. But as they closed in, two defiant eyes met theirs. Breathing heavily, face smudged with dirt and firelight dancing in her eyes, Katie rasped, "That was a damn good bike, you jerk." Amidst the confusion and the sting of pain, Katie's eyes darted, searching for any familiarity in the group that had now surrounded her. A flash of recognition passed over her face as she caught sight of the UCM unit patch on the men's sleeves. This was her only chance, her anchor in the whirlwind of events. "Take me to Robert Squires," she rasped, each word punctuated by the throbbing pain from her abrupt meeting with the tunnel floor after her crash. One guard, his eyes cold and unyielding, scoffed, "You're not meeting anyone. We've had our share of unwanted guests." He gestured to two others, a silent command to subdue her. With frustration boiling in her, she fumbled in her pocket, producing her own UCM unit patch, a symbol of her allegiance. "I am one of you. Do you hear me?" But her plea fell on deaf ears. "You could have stolen that from just about anyone," the guard retorted. They began dragging her, the world spinning around her as a sickening wave of dizziness overcame Katie, the repercussions of her fall now taking hold. Outside the cold, cavernous expanse of the tunnel, the trio decided to transport her to the headquarters. Katie's mind raced, trying to stay focused despite her physical state. She needed to see Robert. She was their only hope of rescuing Sierra from her captors, had they not outright killed her. Gathering every ounce of strength left in her, she shouted, "You need to take me to Robert Squires. It's about Sierra. The Chinese have her." Her desperate plea seemed to give the guards pause. For a heartbeat, their stoic expressions wavered as they exchanged a brief, uncertain glance, but they remained silent, leaving Katie engulfed in a tension thick enough to cut with a knife. As Katie and the two UCM soldiers entered the front gates of HQ, she was struck by the eerie stillness. The once bustling base, teeming with personnel and equipment when she last saw it, now seemed almost deserted, with only a skeleton crew busy training new recruit. The once bustling HQ building now felt eerie and abandoned. Every step echoed through the vast hallways, reminding Katie of the uncertainty that lay ahead. She was ushered into what had once been an office but was now repurposed as a makeshift jail cell. The cold steel bars were a stark contrast to the once welcoming environment she remembered. Desperation gripped her and she banged on the bars, shouting for her release, for someone to listen to her. But her pleas seemed to disappear into the emptiness of the compound. Her voice grew hoarse and head ached, but she refused to be silenced. Just as the hopelessness began to settle in, a familiar figure entered the room. Angelique, with her unmistakable silhouette and graceful posture, was the last person Katie expected to see. The overwhelming emotions took over, and Katie cried out her name. "Angelique!" Recognition flashed in Angelique's eyes, followed by an emotion Katie couldn't quite place. Was it relief? Surprise? Or perhaps a mix of both? "Katie?" Angelique murmured, her voice almost drowned in disbelief. "Is that truly you? Where's the others?" Angelique wasted no time, gesturing to the guards to unlock the cell. The clang of the unlocking mechanism was the sweetest sound Katie had heard all day. The two embraced. As they held on, Katie began to spill out her words in a frantic rush. "Sierra, I think they have her." She drew them away towards Oklahoma City. "I hid in a ventilation shaft. St. Louis is swarming with Chinese troops." Angelique interrupted her, her face filled with concern. "Katie, calm down. I can't make out what you're saying. Let's go to the battle room. You can tell me everything there." She gently steered Katie past the guards and down a corridor. "But where is everyone? And where's Robert?" Katie questioned, her eyes darting around, still trying to make sense of the changes in the familiar surroundings. "They deployed a few days back," Angelique explained, her voice laced with pain. "I had to stay behind because some Nazi bastard shot me." As they walked, a melodious voice seemed to waft through the corridor, enchanting Katie's ears. As she asked about its source, "Who is that?" Angelique halted and gestured back towards the direction of the sound. "That," she said with a hint of admiration, "is the voice of Ivory Hecker. She's the reason I'm still here, and the reason we're still fighting. She and her team have become our lifeline, our communications. She's the voice of this war, connecting us with the battlefronts to the east and south. Her network is growing every day. She can now reach allies from the East Coast down to Texas." Feeling the urgency, Katie requested, "Can we bring her into the battle room? She needs the latest updates from the east." Angelique nodded, and soon Ivory joined them, her presence filling the room with energy as she entered smiling with a small flower in her hair. "Hi, you have new information for me?" Ivory asked. Once seated, Katie took a deep breath and began recounting every event, every detail from the moment they had separated till her dramatic escape from the tunnels beneath Jefferson City. Every syllable she spoke fueled the intensity of their situation. Ivory ran her fingers through her hair, disbelief evident on her face. An underground highway from St. Louis to Corpus Christi? How did they manage such a colossal feat without anyone noticing? She paused, realization dawning. Right. When the government has its claws in the media, it controls the narrative. Angelique, with a steely focus, studied the UCM's current positions on the map. Katie's revelation about the tunnel and its vastness posed both challenges and opportunities. "How far back did you say the junction was?" Angelique questioned. 68.2 miles, came Katie's prompt reply. Angelique raised an eyebrow, impressed. "That's oddly specific. How can you be so sure?" Katie grinned. "The tunnels had mile markers, just like on the interstate." Ivory, adjusting her earpiece, chimed in with a worried tone. "I've lost contact with Robert's Swiftboat team hours ago as they went radio silent. Their last known location was approaching St. Louis." The room felt the weight of her words. If Robert and his team were out of the loop, there was no way to warn him about Sierra. Angelique asked loud enough to anyone in the room, "Have the tunnel communication system been repaired?" A soldier at the back of the room piped up. "We've looked into it, ma'am. The issue isn't on our end. Whatever's causing the blackout, it's deeper inside." Ivory spoke with confidence in her information. "The latest updates from the front line indicate that Commander Karnik and his land forces will engage the enemy within days. We're in a race against time." Angelique processed this, eyes darting across the sprawling map before her. With Sam and the RAA dug in at St. Albans, they were already preparing for the storm ahead. But the underground supply route was the real game-changer. If the Chinese maintained control, it would spell disaster for the resistance. Angelique meticulously traced the tunnel to its junction point. Her voice, firm, broke the tension. The tunnel may be indestructible, but their convoys are not. If we seize the junction, we cripple their supply chain. Everyone was taken aback by the boldness of the idea. They were all aware of the high stakes, and desperate times called for desperate measures. Ivory nodded in agreement. It's a gamble, but it's one we might just win. Returning her focus to the map, Angelique's thoughts shifted southward. Any news on the Vanguard in Texas? She inquired. Last I heard, they were clashing with the Chinese near Corpus Christi, Ivory began, pausing to sift through a pile of notes. They also report enemy forces surfacing in Fort Worth and Dallas, but they were not sure how. With this new info, the underground highway seems to be their primary means of mobilization. A chill ran down Angelique's spine. The Chinese were spreading fast. Make sure the Vanguard knows about the tunnel. If we can chalk off the enemy supplies at the origin, it may give our forces the edge they need. As the reality of the situation settled in, Angelique's resolve strengthened. With fire in her eyes, she met Ivory's gaze. We must ensure our lines of communication remain open. We fight not just for ourselves, but for Sierra, Robert, and every soul who believes in the future. Ivory shares a warm, knowing smile with Angelique and Katie. I'm going to check on Shaw. Doc is slated to release him today, albeit for light duty. I want to ensure he doesn't decide to set off on a trek back to Pennsylvania the moment he's discharged. Let me know what you decide. The air around them seemed to lighten with her words. With a stanch gaze, Angelique, serving as the battle captain at command, offered a faint smile, eyes shadowed by unspoken worries, and observed Ivory until she blended into the distance. And continuous thought danced around her mind. The urgency of seizing the junction in the tunnel was paramount. However, their numbers were critically low, everyone scattered and deployed to the front. It seemed almost impossible to mount a substantial offensive. A spark of realization illuminated her thoughts. Shaw. He had been traversing across the country to Pennsylvania until he was wounded. They didn't need a large force to take the junction. They needed traps, devices to hinder and slow down the enemy's progress. The solution needed to be more tactical, more strategic. With excitement in her voice as she addressed Katie, "Come with me." Her thoughts were already racing ahead, visualizing potential obstructions and strategic placements. We need to see what Marks can devise to delay the transports in the tunnels. The strategy was clear. Slow them down, buy them time. It was a tactical game, and every second gained slowing them down was a victory in itself.